Assalamu alaikum. I'm Abdul.
And I'm Mariam. Welcome to the Muhsiner podcast.
All right, so Muhsiner is from Muhsin and Millionaire. It's about our journey towards becoming people who live with Ihsan and build wealth in faith, family, and impact. Okay, welcome to another episode of the Muhsiner podcast. Today I have with me again Dr. Bilal Bugaje with his wife, Sajida Mohammed. Sajida, by way of introduction, Sajida has a degree in Abrahamic religions and a master's in creative writing. I read your blogs and I enjoy them. They're very deep sometimes, and you do write very well. How many books have you written now? My kids, I think they own two or three, and one of them has basically made its way into our daily vocabulary. So everybody has a Jaria jar now. And yeah, so tell us a little bit about the books you've written, and we'll link to them in the show notes, but I think they're available like on Amazon and other online bookstores and so.
Alhamdulillah, I've written two books with my sister Aisha. She wrote the books, I edited them, and then we did the publishing process together. Two children's books. One is Sophia's Jariyah, and the other one is Marshmallow Sabr, which is based on the marshmallow test, but with a bit of a Islamic spin on it. And then there's one I did for the National Agency for the Great Green Wall here in Nigeria, which is called Our Great Green Country. And then there's one that I did in Hausa, made Buken
Oh
Kiso.
yeah. Yeah, we own
So
that
yeah.
one too. Okay, mashallah. All right. So a question to you both before we kind of get in too deep. So tell us a bit about your journey together. How did you meet? How did you end up getting married?
Okay, so the story, the way I remember it, because I think we sometimes remember things differently, but we met through you and Miriam. Miriam told me about the friend of the guy that she's courting, and then she encouraged me more than once to give my contact details if he can reach out. And then, yeah, eventually I agreed. And then we started emailing, of which you and Miriam were also part of the beginning of that. So from our group emails, we branched out to our own emails, and then alhamdulillah, it grew from there.
I do also remember this, but the funny thing, Mariam, also how we met was that
Yeah.
when she came to
Yeah.
Dubai, we had been talking, but when she came to Dubai, she was transiting to the UK or something. I was in Dubai at the time. So her friend had to convince her to come and see me. But she wasn't going to. And one
Yeah.
look, she was smitten. One look, and that was
Yeah.
I also remember one thing actually. What I found
Yeah.
particularly amazing about your journey towards getting married was that how long was it before you actually saw each other? I know you had been emailing, Bilal was reading your blogs, so you're writing, and it wasn't the age of Snapchat or Zoom calls. So how long was it before you actually saw each other? First in a video call and then second in person?
So I'll say mine and then you say yours. But what I remember is we first met in person, right? About 3 or 4 months after emailing and stuff. And then the video calls commenced after that. That's what I remember.
Yeah, I think it is, which is quite interesting because you would think the way people would do it now is just turn the camera on themselves and just take a selfie and just send it. But we had to go through that whole confusion I had to go through. I was just like, at some point, I was like, you know what? I'll see when I see you. I'll just get to see you when I see you. And I think it was maybe you had glasses like shades in the photos or in some of them. So I really couldn't tell who was who in that picture. And I looked at it a few times. So yeah,
Wow.
we took a while. It took a while before we...
That's bold. That's definitely something different. But for me, it gives you a chance to know each other before because sometimes you see somebody for the first time and your mind does this thing where it makes an opinion or it places people in certain buckets, especially if it's this kind of a relationship. So for me, it was beautiful to see that. And you had a lot of writing as well, right? So I think I remember sharing your blog post with Bilal very early on, and yeah, he was just impressed. So it's like for me, it's like it's a good way to get to know someone by like getting to know like their writing or just getting to know them without the pressure of this is how you look. Almost impossible these days.
And at the time, I was also writing, my blog was active. So yeah, there was the side of the blogs, but then the emails when we started speaking. Now, I remember when I told you that we kept on talking and you guys are not on the email. At some point, we just left you guys and created another email. Talking, you were like, what? And my thinking at the time was we were just spamming you because it was just the two of us that were talking, and she would write, and the emails were quite long for today's standards, right? Every email, every night or every 2 days would be maybe 2 pages, like A4 if you were to write, or maybe even longer than that. So at some point I just thought, no, I mean, these guys were just trying to connect us, and now they have to suffer through our emails. And so we decided to just leave you without notice to start our own email. But yeah, so that was the main idea initially. And we basically knew each other in writing before we met each other. And 2 forms of writing, right? Because your email brings out the quirky side of you. It's almost as if you are thinking as you're writing. Whereas with your blogs are more thoughtful. Sometimes they're poems, they're more curated in a sense.
But before we move on, I would be remiss to not mention, because my sister was the one who encouraged us to actually connect you, because sometimes you're like, well, what if it doesn't go well? You don't want to just cause awkwardness. And so she gets a shout out for this one. I think saw you, and she was like, yeah, this would be a good match for Bilal. And so, okay. Now we're going to get into some questions. I've kind of grouped them into sections. So the first section would be on courtship and before marriage or early marriage stage. So I know, Bilal, you created a courtship framework document, and I've read it. If you had to distill that one into a few key principles, what would be like the heart of that advice for someone who is preparing for marriage? So I'll let you give a general overview, a summary of that, and then we'll get into more specific advice for men and women.
Okay, so maybe since we're telling stories about how we met, it connects to the story of the courtship template. The courtship template was my way of having framework to even navigate this whole marriage thing. Now, if I were to give you an advice, and I'm going to jump the gun a bit here, I would say be very intentional about marriage. And the starting point for marriage shouldn't be when are you getting married, is whether you're getting married. Now, if you decide to get married, which means you must have answered some questions and seen the benefits of it towards your ultimate journey that would be judged in the akhirah, then you look at how the marriage can fit, because you cannot lose sight of that goal, that the marriage is just a means, not an end in itself, even though this is a common confusion I see with people quoting a particular hadith saying the marriage itself is an end. But that's another discussion. You also kind of had to convince me. And then it was because I was reading a book. Now, you already had me from her blog post. Yes, I was impressed by the way she was thinking, and like Abrahamic religion, I was thinking to myself, who even does an undergraduate in Abrahamic religions, right? So that was quite fascinating to me. And at the time, I was reading the book by Reza Aslan on, what's that, Saj? What's the name of the book, Reza Aslan?
No God but God?
Zealot.
Oh, Zealot.
Yeah. So I was reading Zealot, and it was a very light book to read. It was quite interesting, but it was a really good read for me. And one of the things I find challenges with is I don't have people to discuss some books, because I read philosophy sometimes, or I used to, and like other topics that people around me don't necessarily find interesting. So I was looking for someone to discuss religion, and I thought, Abdul mentioned this person with Abrahamic religions background can have a discussion on this, then it's up. So really, when I asked for to be connected, was really with that in mind. It wasn't so much to start courting, but it was a possibility. And after we had started conversing, I realized, okay, I would like to marry this person, or at least attempt So that was when it occurred to me that I don't really have a framework to work with. So then I started thinking about all the things, all the questions. How would it look like to have a courtship? You then answer the question of whether courtship should be prolonged. Should it go on for years before marriage? Why would you do courtship? And what are the issues that I've seen failing, or what I would attribute to the causes of failure in some marriages? And how would we address them before marriages? Because it's always seemed to me like there's some obvious questions that people don't ask between themselves and their spouses. So all those things culminated in that framework. And it was, of course, you gave me feedback quite early into it. You even have a section that you basically wrote. One of the charts and tables, Abdul, you wrote that. Then I had Aj also go through it because she understood where I was coming from and thought it was a good idea. So she also went through it so that we agree on things we were going to go through before deciding if we wanted to go ahead with marriage. So the courtship template itself became a more generalized version of what we were going to go through because we thought it would be a good idea to then share with people, and it had to be made more general and less specific to our situation at that time. So this is what the courtship template was about. It's just a framework to get you to court your spouse or to engage in courtship in a way that can lead to more fruitful, more intentional, and goal-oriented marriage. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the
That sounds
introduction, I think.
okay. So maybe we'll pass it to Sajida now, and thinking about that courtship phase, it's good to hear that you actually contributed to the template yourself before you even got married. So that's very interesting in its own. But what advice would you give to women kind of looking to get married in this day and age? If it's an expensive mistake if you make a mistake in that regard. So what would you advise women to look out for, how to prepare?
So I think for me, something that was a realization that I came to before I even met Bilal was that I'm not sure about marriage. I don't know if it's in my, qadr or not, but I'm not going to focus on it. I'm going to focus on myself and just improving myself, that like jihad of the nafs. Focus on myself, on my faith, on improving in that way. There's something me and Mariam had. It was like this ultimatum that we gave ourselves in relation to marriage, which is like deen over dunya. So the idea was that we called it the poke ultimatum because at the time we used to call each other poketina because we used to poke each other on Facebook. I don't know if you remember that feature, but it was like, yeah. So the idea was that when it comes to men, if we meet somebody, if the goal is not marriage from the beginning, then we don't want anything that will take years. Let it be clear from the beginning when we meet that the goal is marriage. If it's not going to go in that direction, then we can just part ways cordially. With that in mind, I was really focused on just myself. If somebody came along while I'm on this journey of self-improvement, then we'll see where it goes. So I didn't have like a I must get married sort of thing. But if I was to give general advice, I would say from that, focus on yourself, improving yourself, being, the best that you can be, the jihad of the nafs, that sort of thing. And trusting in Allah's plan. So yeah, along those lines, then I was introduced to Bilal and we started talking. And yeah, so the courtship template really helped in the sense that one of the goals, I think, of the template is to make it, to reduce the amount of time that it takes for people to get to know whether they would want to marry this person. So it's like right from the beginning, you sit down, you discuss the things that are important to you. Even if it's not important to somebody else, what are the things that you think at this point in your life are negotiable? What are the things that are not negotiable? You sit down, you talk about them. What's important to you? So you talk about pretty much all sorts of things, everything and nothing, and you try to synthesize it with the answer like, this person, do I want to marry this person? And the idea is to know that within a very short amount of time. So for me and Bilal, I think once we started using the term, I think within 2 to 6 months, we had both felt I think strongly that we would like to get married, even though the marriage itself took place like a year and a half later. But in terms of like the traditional things, letting parents know and this and that, I think by month 6 we had already decided. So cut through all the like lovey stuff and get to the just go straight to business. Put all your cards on the table, trusting in Allah's plan. Having obviously there's also a level of confidentiality which is very important between both parties. I do believe in going with your gut sometimes, but obviously guided by some level of reason and stuff.
So I think what I take away from that is being open, have that discussion and know what your negotiables are and what your non-negotiables are. And before you become completely smitten and fully like lovey-dovey, before that all happens, make sure you have those important discussions so that you're not biased. One thing also that personally I'm seeing more and more and makes me glad that with my marriage is people we used to get introduced, and when you would meet someone, especially for marriage, they came with like there was a lot of reference, either recommendations or at least people that you could ask what really is this person and how are they really, not just from your perspective, but from other people's perspective. I think that's important and very much so these days because it's very easy, especially as a man, to pretend to be something else. You can do that for a long time. Trust me, a man can pretend for a very long time. So even if it's a year and a half that you've known the man, you may not really know the man. So it's important in your situation that maybe somebody else introduced you to that person and
Yeah.
have that validation.
No, I was just gonna say with the email because we used the template after we met in person. So we had like those 3 months worth of emails. So already I think I had, based on the emails anyway, I had an idea of, oh, there's a way this guy thinks that I like, and he seems sincere, and so
Yeah, so I wanted to mention how much this recommendation thing, until today, things that Abdul recommends to me, I take them seriously. And I'm sure people have people like that in their lives, right? There are people whom, when they send you a link, if it's to a clip or a recommendation for to watch a film or books, you would probably take more seriously. So naturally, when he recommended someone, it comes with that much weight because like his recommendations have not failed me yet. So there's that. I also want to mention when Saj was introducing herself, just another plug, she hasn't just written children's books. Well, she's not just writing children's books. She's also writing novels and she has plans. She's currently writing about 2 young adult novels and has plans for even bigger stuff, inshallah. But the way, what's relevant here is that I remember she even made a fictionalized version of the courtship template because we were at the time we thought not many people were using it, or rather than using it, people would read it and they maybe wanted something more fun to engage with. Then they find out it's just an easy read without a lot of the entertaining stuff. So she made a story or wrote a story about a courtship that happens. And in that, it was kind of an embodiment of the principles in the courtship template and what happens when there are failures or oversights in what the courtship template generally advises. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that actually. I don't think I've read that. So we'll definitely share that as well. This is interesting because I really like now that my oldest son is a reader, he reads a lot. Literally am going through lists of books and I'm having to like filter which ones are appropriate for him. So I'm going through that list very quickly and I often find myself trying to find newer ones and newer ones. For example, he read the Harry Potter series, not all of them, I think from what I heard up to a certain part, I think it's okay. But some of the later parts are a little more heavy on the magic and horror. But all this to say, I really wish we had a Muslim author who wrote a series like a Harry Potter series. That would be so amazing. So Saj, I will pass this on to you. Please do your young adult series. We have a big audience. We need that.
Yeah, inshallah. It's funny you say that because we read all these children's classics with the girls, and every time I have this thought in the back of my head, like, I need Muslim characters in the classics. I want a story that has a Muslim girl or Muslim boy or whatever that's going through these adventures that are just so wonderful to read. And there's so many books. And you can pick up all the values and this and that. But at the end of the day, it's like an Alice in Wonderland, and there's all these characters that sometimes, in terms of identity, maybe our kids cannot relate to immediately. But inshallah, it's something, definitely something. I was going to say there's lots of Muslim children's storybooks out there, and that's amazing. But in terms of these very excellent children classics, I'm yet to come across one that has
Long
the same
form.
thing that these classics give you. Yeah.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
long, even multi-part series, and just the short books are we have a few of
Yeah.
them personally as well in our house. Okay, next question is, so this is to you. So let's say after marriage, you've talked about the courtship template and the process of getting married, but now after marriage, so how have you as a couple approached marriage intentionally? So what is it, conversations, what habits do you have, and just what mindset do you have that you would say form the foundation of your marriage? So start with Bilal.
This is an interesting response, what I would be provided, because it may seem like I am downplaying the courtship template. Now, you see, the courtship template was written by people who were not married yet, but who could see with an outsider's perspective what seems to be wrong with marriages, and is very useful in that. And it's got some things right about marriage. But again, every marriage is different. So you don't want to tailor any solution too closely to a very specific marriage, because the moment you have two people, the permutations and possibilities are just endless because of how they would interact with each other, their personalities, and their life experiences. So it's very difficult to generalize at the end of the day, but we can do some things there, things you can take caution about. So now, having been married, and what I would say was perhaps the most useful thing from the courtship templates, maybe let's say two things. One is being sincere. Just be sincere. Be sincere and have the other person's best interest at heart. If one of you is being devious or wicked, then it just can't work. Someone is going to suffer, and it just won't work, I think. The second thing is that what the courtship template did for us was more than give us or make us had to take decisions that would be useful to date for us, but also to establish a communication channel and a communication process, in a sense, which we kept on refining, but it has allowed us to virtually talk about anything, be able to talk about anything. And that I cannot emphasize or overemphasize how important it is, because if you want to generalize, then I think this would be the ultimate generalization. Engage with each other in conversations about whatever potential challenges you're going through, and be sincere about it. Don't go in there to be self-serving. Always have your collective interest at heart. And that would be probably the most generalizable and useful resource, in a sense, from the experience of the courtship template.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. The first point, I think communication, everybody talks about communication. So that one I think is overplayed. Like everybody knows you should communicate. But that first one about just being on the same team, like having the interest of each other at heart, that is like gold. If you don't have that, I don't even know how you would have a marriage, to be honest, because I can't imagine going into something thinking that oh, I'm not sure that my wife has my interest at heart. Like I have to hide this, or I have to hide that, or maybe if it's money, like I have to hide this money because I don't want her to see it. Like that I don't know how a marriage would work if there is no, like you're both not playing from the same team. So alhamdulillah that I think I have that in my marriage, and I thank God every day for that. But yes, that's a good, very good one. Thank you. So Saj, over to you. And
Before she
okay.
answers, let me ask, are we on the same team?
Of course. In sync.
Yeah, I think we're on the same team.
No, I said in sync.
Yes.
Yeah. Because like even if there's
Uh,
disagreements, right? Like as long as you're
yeah.
both on the same team, then it's fine. It can't be the end of the world. Okay, so the question was, how do you approach marriage intentionally? Like this, so this is after
Mm,
marriage, right? After the courtship template and you actually
mm,
got married. So what are like
mm,
conversations, habits, and principles
mm.
that you apply to like make your marriage a success?
Definitely. I think you said it's overplayed, I guess, so I don't want to say it again. But I guess there's different ways that you can communicate, right? In the beginning, we used to do like we'd sit down and be like, okay, let's talk. How are we doing? Are we okay? Do we need to, where do we need to improve? Do you have issues with this? That sort of thing. So it falls under communication. But I think it's intentional in the sense that we're sitting down to ask us to assess where we're at and how we need to improve and things like that. I remember, I think one of the first kind of, would I even call it a disagreement? I think personalities, when it comes to communication, I think personalities are important, right? Because I think both Bilal and I, we're not the fiery type in that sense. And if there's a disagreement, we would both just mellow down. It's kind of passive. We're not really shouting at each other or anything like that. So the first time, this is what I remember, that we had this sort of thing. It's like I just noticed the vibe was a little bit off. And this is in the early days. And so for about a week or so, I was just like, oh, I don't know what this is. I'm just feeling a bit like there's something wrong, but I'm not sure. After about a week, he asked me, he's like, what's wrong? And then I'm like, no, you, what's wrong? And he's like, no, you went off a little bit, and he's not sure. He was giving me space. I'm like, no, it was you. And then so for that first one, I don't even know what it was, but something went off. And so I remember thinking at that point, okay, if I ever feel like this, I'll just bring it up and let's just talk about it. So over the years, we've had plenty of these things. And we bring it up and we talk about it. And sometimes we're good again for however many months. And then something always comes up. But I think what you guys spoke about being on the same team, when it comes to this agreement, it just helps so much because I know that anything that he does say, it's never coming from this place that is negative. Even if there's a disagreement, it's always coming from a positive place. It's always coming from a place of, and when I say something to him that's maybe critical in that sense, we know it's coming from this good place where we know that this is our family. And what's the third rule or the second rule of the Mohsineh rules?
Yeah,
Take care of each other, right?
Yeah, we take care of each other.
Yeah. So knowing that, I think, is very important. And then, yeah, sitting down to just assess things every once in a while, and even things that they say in terms of love languages, talk about those things, figure out what is yours. Sometimes disagreements come from those things. Like maybe I just want him to be more spontaneous and say, let's go out. So maybe I like going out and doing things outside the house, and he's not that kind of person. But if I tell him that and he knows, maybe he'll make more of an effort. And these things, like just doing things together. And then when the kids came along, it's like, okay, we need to make sure they're a part of us, but they shouldn't come between us, the relationship that we have. So constantly asking ourselves, are we okay? Are things going as we want them to be?
Okay, wow. It's honestly very eerily similar how your marriage is to mine. Because I think just in a lot of things that you mentioned, especially because me and Bilal have a similar enough, I think, personality. And I'm hearing from what you're saying, you and Mariam also have a similar personality. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it takes some work, but alhamdulillah. Okay.
Oh, also, sorry. And this
Yep.
is something Miriam told me, but praying together. I think praying together is very important. As many prayers as possible in a day, do them together. Do them when the kids come, do them with the kids. Before they come, just do them, Eating as well together, I think at the same time, I think is really important as well. Even if it's one meal a day, it doesn't have to be all of them. But these times that but yeah, praying together definitely.
So we'll move on to the next question, which will round out this section. So the question is, what's your take now that you've been married for a decade? Early marriage or late marriage? What would you advise a friend who's early 20s or something like that? I remember somebody telling me, like an uncle, I remember telling me, maybe you were there for this even, Bilal, I'm not sure, but an uncle telling me, just focus on your studies and your work, and this marriage thing, just forget about it. You can always get married later. But of course, at that age, I'm like, nah, nah, marriage. I want to get married. I want to get married. Like, my life will like be, change. Like, my life will start proper once I get married somehow. So, what's your take after all this time?
I would say, just in line with what I was saying earlier, there's no early or late marriage, just there's the right time. There was a time in my life when I thought it made sense to get married early if everything else is aligned and stuff. But I think what's more important can make you delay it, even though there's a cultural push to do it. I wouldn't say early, but there's a window where then the pressure just heightens. And then everyone thinks conventionally you should be married, especially on women. They have the most of that. Like you were told, it's almost like as a guy, you can wait until you're 60 to even to get married, or maybe get married the second, third, or fourth time. So usually it's the biological clock argument that's made for given to women and stuff. So there's a lot of pressure put on them. And some of the merits I remember, I used to think of early marriage is just so that you have the energy when your kids grow up or as they're growing up, especially through the more difficult years of like teenage years and stuff. You shouldn't be using a stick to assist yourself when your kids are teenagers. I mean, if that's your situation, then you probably have other support system. Maybe you have older kids who can look after the kids. But given what we have in mind, or most people in our peers have in mind, is that you having a relatively small family, maybe not up to, I don't know, I would even put a number to it, but it's relatively small compared to our parents. And because of that, you are likely going to be living in somewhere urban, and you would have to deal with your kids. You may have house helps, but that's not sufficient. So I wanted to have that energy. And what has really changed my opinion on this is just age it's kind of a number, to be fair, because you can have someone who is 40 look like someone who is 60, or someone who is 60 doing better than someone who is 40, because there's genetics definitely that play a part. But the ones you have control over is workout. And me, I'm a big workout person, right? Just stay fit, work out, stay at your optimum as much as possible, get the most given your genetics. And if that is the case, I expect you will, with a healthy life of a diet and workout, in your 70s, you should be able to deal with a teenager. You should have the energy, the attention, all of that. You should be able to do that. So this is the way I think about it now.
Okay, so I'm not sure if I got a recommendation for early there. It sounded like I did, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, Saj, how about you?
Yeah, and I think there's no late or early. There's just the right time, which is whenever it happens.
Would it be possible, let's say, before somebody turns 20, or has to be
I
like,
think it can be. No, I know people who have married like 18 and 17 or something. They've been married for close to 12, 13 years now. They've got 4 kids. They're doing, as far as I know, doing very well. She writes about her life and experiences and everything. So this is someone that I know personally. But she would say, like, just marry early. It was like one of the best decisions that in a way was made for them, but they agreed, obviously, because it was the parents that came together and then they agreed. And she's like, it's the best thing for her. But there's a book by B. Roberts, I think it's called She Wore Red Trainers. It's fiction. And in that book as well, the recommendation is early, right? I was talking to my niece about it because she was like, oh my God, this book, it made us all dream about getting married early and stuff. I think it depends. 'Cause even this person that I know personally, she was very mature at 18 or 17 when she got married. Her character on point. She was a mature person. And so is her husband, well, he was at the time. But I think there's a lot to say because I know an 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds that if they were to tell me right now they'd get married, I'll be like, hold on a second, you've got some growing to do. So I think there's a lot to say about maturity and character and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But at the same time, like Bilal, we went to some schools together. We grew up together, and a lot of times it was the Wild West. You were just left to your own devices, and it was wild. Like it could have gone really, really bad. But in some ways, I think about anchoring your child in a marriage or something like that, just to go through that type of turbulence. But I definitely hear you, it has to be somebody who is at least showing that maturity, and that depends from person to person.
I don't know how I feel about if you want to curtail certain behaviors by marriage in today's cultural context, then it's like you are likely amplifying the damage that could happen. Because now, let's say it's an unstable guy and you get them married to an unassuming girl, then the damage now can be amplified in that she's now likely going to be affected by his behavior and they may have children and then it complicates things, you know? So yeah, the maturity bit is very important, I think.
Okay. Yeah, and on that, actually, this is advice that I give to any new couples I come across, which the elders don't like sometimes. I tell them, like, just take a year, maybe more, just get to know each other, because especially if they're practicing, they probably didn't get to know each other before marriage and they tried to keep things halal, let's say. So get to know each other. If you jump into a marriage and straight up start having children, like pregnancy messes with hormones, it brings a lot of complications. So you're not even getting to know the actual person. And then when the child comes, of course, that's a whole other thing. Everybody's going to be stressed out. There's going to be sleepless nights. You're really not getting to know the person. And like it or not, these days, like the popular culture is dating for years and years, different people, living with different people, engaging with different people. So at least just date your partner, date your wife, date your husband for a year at least. Just get to know each other before all the craziness starts. Now, of course, the children come when Allah wants them to come. So there's that as well. But that would be my advice.
And here's something funny in relation to that, because we followed the same advice, right? So we were married, we were alone, we were together, Saj and I, for about 3 years before we had our first child. So we had a long, like, boyfriend-girlfriend situation where it was just the two of us. And the funny thing is, sometimes you just don't want to explain to people. If I had time, I would explain to you and say, well, we're kind of doing this. It was planned. And all this comes from the courtship template as well. These were things we discussed because we knew we had not cohabitate, but we wanted to just live, the two of us, and also to potentially reduce risk so that you may have all the good ideas. You may think everything looks rosy and you may try your best, but then the marriage at the end of the day may not be for you. So why complicate the situation with kids in the first year when, if for whatever reason you decide to separate for whatever reason? The funny thing is that people don't know we were doing this consciously. Many people would pray for us because they would look at us and be like, oh man, a year, over a year, like 2 years, she's not pregnant. And we'll just say, I mean, because we at the time also don't even know if we can conceive, right? We don't even know if it's possible for us. We just know that we haven't started doing it, attempting consciously. So they would always pray for us. And we just found out that someone who hasn't seen us before we had our kids, we had both our kids while we were away on my PhD. And when we came back, and the woman was so happy, she said, and she made comments like, you see, this is what God does. Like God can do this and that. And initially I was just like, what's she talking about? But then I figured out, oh, all along she thought we couldn't, even though we didn't know if we could. And now we're coming back to the country with 2 kids. It's like, what? Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're gonna move on now to another section talking about parenting. So, yeah, generally, what are the values and principles that guide how you parent your kids?
So, like, I had a similar conversation recently. Someone was asking me if I had like a book to recommend about parenting. And to be fair, I don't think I did much research in that sense, or I can necessarily point you to a book. So I've probably just been working with principles in my head. And these are principles that I've always had, even before getting married. Like sometimes some people say I'm good with kids. So I'm not good with kids in the general sense. I'm like the jolly uncle or whatever, but I engage well with kids. And that's because I talk to them like adults, kind of. Like when I talk to kids, I talk to them in earnest. We just have conversations. I believe they have the capacity to engage on beyond what we give them credit for. So when I talk to them, I project a certain expectation of them, and they typically respond. So for me, it's generally something I would say as a principle that you can engage with a child no matter how young, but meet them at their level without infantilizing them. The second thing is to understand that their expectations at different ages. So there are things that I would make a fuss about at a certain age, but I wouldn't at a younger age, for example. So when they are in this stage of development, you need to have a framework. Again, I keep coming back to this idea of having frameworks, but maybe that's my own bias. So there's the book by Chilton Pierce, I think, Magical Child.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has this concept of matrix. And the idea is you have a world in a world in a world. So at different stages in a child's life, their world, the extent of their world keeps expanding. So at some point, the child doesn't even know it's separate from the mom. This is while it's in the womb and in its early days. Then at some point, it realizes it's separate from the mom. And this is why the mom out of sight becomes out of mind for him, and they panic when the mom is not around at some point. So it keeps on opening up gradually. Whatever decisions I think I take is usually with that in mind. You want the child, you need to understand where they are, or what is something they can't really understand. So for example, since knowing that I don't, unless I'm too excited, so I have my days of faults, but I don't grab a child like we often do from their moms or their parents when I see them in excitement, because I know based on that framework, it can be traumatic. But depending on their age, it can be quite intense for the child. So these are the things that guide, even though we're not necessarily doing the same thing, we agree on things enough to have overlap and synergy so that it doesn't seem like there's something chaotic in the house. But the most part, we're all on the same page.
Okay, all right. So, Saj, what are your principles for parenting?
So I think one would be that the kids should know that their parents are a team. It's like a unit. In a lot of cases, they'll go to one parent for something and then that parent say no, and then they'll go to the other for something and then that parent might say yes. So I think when they do that, it's because they know that, okay, they're not always on the same page. But I think they should see, there are cases where I guess that's okay. But seeing that you're a team, that their mom and dad are the same in that sense, like in terms of making decisions and stuff like that, I think that's important. And then another framework that we've been very conscious of is the 777 one. I think it comes from a saying from Ali radiallahu anha about play with them the first 7 years and then teach them the next 7 years and then advise them the next 7 years. So that's really guided a lot of what we're doing. And then if you look at just general other books and recommendations and stuff, especially in terms of child development and education and all these things, you'll find lots of other people saying things about, the first 7 years they should play. I don't focus too much about academics and all these things. Just let them be kids, let them play, let them explore the world around them, let them know things from the concrete before they're growing older, when they're ready for abstractions and things like that. And then the next 7, when they're about, generally, I'm not saying like stick to 7, but generally speaking, you can tell with the child that's in front of you, you know, what they need. You know, so there's someone that I know, she says, start with the child in front of you, this child in front of you. Who are they? What do they do? So the
Okay.
next 7 years, teach them, next 7 years, advise them, because they reach a point where you can't tell them go to bed and they'll just go to bed, you know, it's harder.
Okay, that's amazing. Actually, I was looking for a way to explain to my oldest recently why I was treating the youngest in a different way than him. So this 777 is just an awesome saying that I could have used, and I'll definitely talk to him about it. I think I tried to explain it, but it just perfectly encapsulates what I was trying to say.
And I've also had to explain to my 6-year-old at the time, maybe even 5, because on several occasions why the standards are different. So I think she's finally getting it. She doesn't quite challenge me when she sees me giving them different treatment. And I tell her to recall, mashallah, she has good memory. She usually remembers things from like 3 years old or 2 years old, and she says it, and you're like, how can you even remember that? But yeah, so I would tell her, do you remember when you were around her age, what I would do? Would I ask you to do this? And she would say, no. Would I treat you like I'm treating her now? She would say, yeah, something like that. I'll say, okay, that's where she is now. So you should just let it go because of that. And by the way, the matrix framework I mentioned is more grounded in reasoning and some empirical surveys, but it actually overlaps quite nicely with the saying by Imam Ali that you do the 777. It quite matches it, even though his goes before birth. Actually, he starts even before birth. It also makes it more understandable compared to when we take it too literally to be like, okay, from 7 we're going to do this. The magical child book is more from a development perspective, child development. So you are looking out for certain things, and generally it would be around that 7 years old point, and it's likely to be earlier for girls than for boys. So you don't wait until it's 7. You may see it at 5 for some kids, and you just switch and gradually transition.
Okay. All right. So the next question here is about, are there any specific pitfalls or things that you're trying to intentionally avoid as parents? I hope that question makes sense. Is there anything negative you're trying to make sure that you just don't have your kids end up in that space, whether it's emotionally or what have you?
Yeah, when you asked that, the first thing that popped into my head is I don't want them to feel like they can never talk to me about something. So I want to keep that channel of communication open through all the stages and all the ages. I'm here, you can talk to me, tell me anything, tell me the silly things, tell me the serious things, the things that are bothering you, how your day was. I want that channel to stay open. I do worry about this point where they feel like they can't come to me, they can't tell me anything. So that's definitely one thing that I want to avoid.
I think there's, I mentioned this in the earlier episode, but your children are a mirror if you pay attention. They pick up all your bad habits, right? And hopefully your good habits as well. So it's a good way to self-improve by correcting them. But when you correct, it's not with instructions. It's never sustainable. You correct them first with instructions, but mainly by changing what you do or improving on how you do it, because that's how they picked it up, and that's how they're going to let it go, by picking up the new way you do it. That's something that I think every parent should do consciously. And I want them to also be very sincere and be able to own up to whatever the situation is. So it's related to what Saj said, but you want them to know what they've done is wrong. Punishment itself or whatever consequence comes with it is going to be there, but it's separate from the blame of them telling you. Because when they tell you something, or when you find out something and you react a certain way, there's a way you can react that they would figure out that, oh, if only they didn't know, the parents didn't know, then maybe it wouldn't have been a problem. And then that becomes a very insidious problem that would eventually lead to a lot of hypocrisy and almost something schizophrenic that we live in today. A big thing.
I think we saw a lot of that growing up, that cat and mouse game. Oh my God, we saw a lot of that.
Like when our kids were, when they could speak and they could understand. So this is before pre-2 years old. They were still infants in a sense. We made it a point never to lie to them that we were going out with them or to sneak out when we're going out. You know, they want to go out with you, but we either just go out without them knowing, or if they see you going out, you talk to them and get them to understand that you're going out, but you're not going with them. Because what I see parents doing often is they say, or parents and uncles and aunts, and this is something we've had to tell our siblings so that, okay, you guys don't do this, or when they do it, we are on the side of the kids. It's that they say, oh, go and get your shoes. Then before they come, they run away, right? Or they kind of deceive them just to get away. But for a child whose world is really just that, right? That's their whole world at that point. They pick up on these things and they realize, oh, I can say one thing and do another thing. When, say, our siblings do that, and I remember there are times when my daughter has complained, someone has done this or they said this and they didn't, then I would tell her, no, go and tell them what they did is wrong. Or if I'm there, I would tell the person, sometimes it's like a cousin, and I would say, no, what you did is wrong. Like, it's kind of in jest, but it's very empowering for the child, I think, to know that their parents are with them. And this is our own code in the house, that when you don't lie to get away to something, you have to say it, face the consequence, and that's better for you. Of course, we bring in God in this equation so that they know we're not doing it just for an isolated principle in that.
Okay, yeah, that sounds really good. Just talking about principles, I know one that Mariam really takes close to heart is the concept of hold on to your kids. There's a book, I think, about that we've read, and the whole idea of just be there for them, because otherwise the world will take them in different directions. But then I always think about that concept, right? And there is certainly a point where it becomes too much, right? It becomes like helicopter parenting. What are your thoughts around holding on too much and being there for them too much? And it's nice for you to have all these rituals and frameworks around the house, but they need to go out and experience other things, right? As you said, Bilal, like your daughter experienced something else that someone did that maybe you don't do in the house. How do you approach dealing with that?
On that, I think we're both kind of on the same page with Saj. It may seem like we are quite liberal in that we allow them to do certain things. And by that, I mean just go on your own there, do this. We're not, okay, go to the stairs, go downstairs if you have to. And some people may think that is dangerous. But what we tell them or when they ask, is that typically we know the boundaries of each child. We know what we should be worried about with this child as opposed to this. We know this child, unless there's like a major accident, they wouldn't be reckless on the staircase. But if you allow them around this and this, there's likely to be trouble. So there's that. So it's almost like a controlled letting go. You're letting them go to grow, but you're observing, you're there to cushion some things. So another thing is on the issue of what is expected of them and what the standards are. That is very important for us. It's that if we don't even shield them, I don't think we shield them. I don't know, Saj, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my thinking is we generally don't shield them from being exposed to things that we think could corrupt them in some way or they shouldn't hear. And especially me, I have a more radical position. It's like, I think even profanity, I don't think my kids need to be shielded from profanity. But I think Saj disagrees on that one. So the point is that what they are exposed to is immaterial if they don't have a way to understand it. And this is what I am interested in. So they can hear whatever profanity they can hear wherever. What they need to understand is that it's not acceptable to use it. But I'm somehow even glad that they know some things exist. But it's just how do you engage with that? Are you allowed to, are you supposed to do that? Should you do it? Just because you know something doesn't mean you should use it, or just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So I focus a lot on the should, what they can, what they should be able to do. So for me, it's like, go do whatever. And the thing Saj mentioned about communication. So usually maybe it's just at this stage, but hopefully it persists until later. We want to keep a communication channel so that if they tell us the weirdest things they've experienced with some people, and then you just put it in perspective to them. And they're like, oh, we did this and this. There are times when they would say, they would just use a word. I don't want to use it on this podcast. They would use a word that shouldn't be said, like a profane word. They would use it so casually. And we just looked at each other. What did this person just say? And then we asked them casually, like, okay, so what did you say? And they would just say it again. And then we call them and it's like, no. Oh, you know, this word actually, it's not really a good word. It's for people who do this and this and that, right? So we're not punishing them for using that word, because the way they heard it, it was in a situation where other kids were using it. And obviously those kids probably know they shouldn't use it in front of adults, but they would use it when they're away. Now, with that explanation, whenever they get into those kids, and I've heard, one of us have had her kind of correcting one of the kids saying, no, you shouldn't, I wouldn't use that word. It's not a good word. So you just empower them. That's my approach.
So you deal with things and process them and talk about them rather than just tuning them out or blocking them out.
I think a lot of people, when they hear that you're homeschooling, they think one of the reasons is that you're holding on too tight to your kids. It's like, no, you're sheltering them too much. There's a whole world out there. And a lot of times I find myself saying, of course, I want to hold on to my kids because I know what's out there, you know. And this one, she's just 2. This one is 3. You know, like there's an age. So I think it's like a letting, a holding on tight and a loosening slowly, you know. So there's a point where, of course, they go. There's nothing you can do about that. But the hope is that in that loosening, in that slow loosening, you've built them up enough, you've cushioned them enough, you've given them enough tools to be able to sift, you know, and to. So I think that's what it is. As much as I do want to just keep them in my house and not step outside, I know that I cannot do that. And also, again, guidance is lost, right? So we pray constantly. They're an amana, they're a trust. It's like they're not mine. Allah has trusted me with them. So I'm trying to fulfill this trust because one day he's going to ask me. He gave me these precious kids. What did I do with them? And being aware of all these things, it's like you want to fulfill their rights that are upon you. And
yeah, that's the way I understand it too. Holding on to your kids means they should have you to talk to, right? They should be able to talk to you about what they're facing, whether it's good or bad. And because my experience growing up, and I still see it today, is like the number one thing that can derail a child from a good path to something bad is influence, right? And friendship and the friends they have that influence them, or the people that so it's definitely the influence. So you want to be part of that influence as much as possible. Yeah. So, okay. So jumping into the next section now, we will have a whole episode about homeschooling, but just a very quick 2 questions about why are you homeschooling? Why are you choosing to do that? And did you always want to do this, or is this something that happened just organically?
so with homeschooling, one of the advantages of being in the younger set of kids is that you get to see your own siblings raise their kids. I have sisters who have homeschooled, and so in my late teens, I was exposed to it through them, and I thought this thing it makes sense. And so I had the opportunity to listen to things and read more about it and become fairly confident in that, oh, if I ever get married and have kids, I would love to try out this thing. I think it just makes sense for raising kids, especially raising Muslim kids, right? The first Muslim rule, like we are Muslims and we behave like Muslims. And so it's not that you can't raise them this way if they go to school, no, but there are options. What options do you think would work best for you and your situation, your family? What would give you a greater chance of achieving the things that you want to achieve for your family? So for me, I think homeschooling just made sense. And so when we were talking in the template framework, raising kids came up, homeschooling, I introduced the subject to him. I think I actually introduced it while we were emailing before the template, but during the template time, it came up as well. And we were both, yeah, if we have kids, we'll definitely try this homeschooling approach.
Okay, Bilal, do you have a why for homeschooling for you?
Yes, I think it's similar. The why is more or less the same. Just that the thing was that I had in my bones, and you and I were in the same primary schools and secondary schools. I had it in my bones, like I knew there was something wrong with conventional schooling. So I had all these points, but because I knew there were all these critiques, then homeschooling was the natural place for me to get to. So this was our commitment. And it's interestingly, it's one of those things that we discussed during the courtship. And that's also partly why maybe we just realized that we were aligned on many things because we brought it up quite early, or she brought it up, and I was chatting there anyway. So that's the why. Now, the other side of it is that without losing the goal, what homeschooling does is essentially give you flexibility, right? So you can then fix all the other things that you don't like about conventional schooling. There's nothing, I wouldn't say we are ideologically committed to homeschooling, but we like the perks. We like the flexibility it gives, and that's a big contributor to why we are doing it. But it's really the other things that we have now identified we want, right? So I started with a negative position saying, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. But then since then, we've identified what we want in education or in training or in tarbiyah. And now, how do we get that? It seems homeschooling is the best approach right now for us to achieve that. In conclusion, I would say the why is usually the how you respond to the question of what is education. So when you answer that question, you then realize what are your priorities, what you want to achieve, or what you consider education or tarbiyah. And then you look for means to achieve it. If, alhamdulillah, there's a school or there's a setup that does everything or most of the things you want to achieve, then maybe you don't need to homeschool. But the flexibility, really good, really, really good.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you touched on that. Homeschooling is different from schooling from home. So you're not trying to just take the school and do it at home and it's a part of it, I suppose, like protecting their circle of influence. But homeschooling is not schooling from home. It's like rethinking education towards what you want and then trying to find the means to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Okay.
home, I think home is always the first school, and they
Yeah,
always come back to home.
yeah,
So,
indeed.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll wrap up with one final question on homeschooling, and that's basically just what's the most challenging and what's the most rewarding thing in homeschooling. And I think from this, people might start to get a flavor of if it's for them before we are able to do like a full episode going into philosophies and curriculum and strategies and things like that. So, what's been the most rewarding part? I think, Bilal, you did answer around the flexibility, maybe, but I'll give you a chance to speak on it. So, what's been the most rewarding and what's been the most challenging?
I think the most rewarding is definitely flexibility is part of it. But I would say the reward has been a teacher. That's probably like the most personally rewarding thing. When Like literally, our daughter, I think a year ago, she could identify the letters aside she can speak and that. But it's like you see them, you teach them something, and now she's reading books, right? She's reading books that are like 100 pages. I don't know about her comprehension level at this point, but it's that there's also tied to that is the efficiency of teaching. So I do most of I would say the Quran is Muslim, Islamic science, Islamic stuff. So the Quran is big. So that's what we've been focusing most of our attention on in terms of like she's now able to read the Qurans, and I taught her that basically from the letters. So it's good to see that I can open pages in the Quran and then she can just read it. And she's been able to do that within about 2 years now with me. And it's so little effort that I put into it. And yeah, so it's just that's the rewarding bit. The challenging part for me, I think, given that I am doing mostly the Quran, and by the way, I am also doing what I would call theology with her. So these are like deep conversations that we have. And I know when those kinds of conversations are theological, she would ask things that may otherwise be dismissed if she asked it in an Islamia setting or to some other sheikhs or something, but are very important theological points that she needs to understand about God and the role of your real role in the world. So I gave the example in the earlier previous episode about like ownership. So that's a theological point actually, right? But someone needs to explain that to her and sit her down, explain to her like, okay, so sorry, I won't go into details now, but that's also something I do. And to see them put that into practice, it's very rewarding just as a teacher. And this is probably what all teachers enjoy. The challenge would be things that require practice and time. Like, even though I mostly work from home these days, I don't go to a 9 to 5. I have time, but I'm also busy doing other stuff. When they need you to sit down with them and just spend an hour practicing something because they're not at the age where you can ask them to go ahead and do it and they would do it diligently. But if you stay with them, they would. They just need you to be there, to be engaging them somehow. And much of the time, I don't have that time. So that's really my challenge now. And we found ways around it, even as it is now. Yeah.
Okay. And Saj, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I just have an example of one of the questions Huda asked. She asked me once, what's the point of life? And I was like, yeah, to worship Allah. And she said, no, not that answer, because she'd kind of asked before. She's like, no, not that answer. And I was like, okay, we need to talk to your dad. And yeah, so I remember she asked him again and they had this very long discussion. And by the end of it, I think whatever it was they spoke about, she was happy with the answer that she was given, which was nice to see. But yeah, for me, with rewards would be the time that I get to spend with them. They're kids, they're stressful, it's hands-on, it's a lot of things, but I'm grateful all the time, alhamdulillah, that I get to spend so much time with them and so much quality time with them. I do get to my point where I'm like, Bilal, it's you and the kids today, I'm going out. I do get those days, but generally speaking, in the scheme of things, the reward for me is that we do have this together. And I'm hoping that at some point in the future, they will look back on these days and be like, yes, my mom was there, my dad, like we were there for them in the best ways, in the ways that matter most in these formational years, that we took the time to spend with them and make it quality. So that's what I enjoy. I enjoy the pace of life. I enjoy that we get to do our own things and explore things. It's wonderful. I'm really happy that we're doing and that we've been exposed to. In terms of challenges for me, it's a consistency. So fighting my own personal demons that I fight and being consistent with the teaching. I've been a lot better in the past few months in terms of our routine and actually sticking to the routine. There are certain things, in terms of work ethic, how I work generally is very all over the place. But with homeschooling, there's a point that the kids reach that you can't be all over the place. It's not just play anymore. You need more of a structure. So that's the most challenging thing for me. But yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm always grateful for this choice that we made.
Okay, yeah, that's beautiful. That's really, really good. Okay, so we'll definitely have an episode in the future to dive deep into this because we are also a homeschooling family, and I know that there are quite a few things that we approach differently, and we just use different, I think, philosophies when it comes to the homeschooling. So it'll be interesting to compare the two and see where we land. Now, finally, maybe a question to just complete this episode. I would be remiss if I didn't also talk about extended family. So, your siblings or your mom, your dad, things like that. Like, what's your approach to that? I remember, Bilal, at some point we were talking about leaving the country, and one of the things you said was you actually thought about it, and you probably are not gonna leave the country on a permanent basis because you want to be close to your parents. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that extended relationship outside of just you, your wife, and your kids.
Yeah. Okay. So I think extended family generally, and then kind of our discussion about staying, remaining in the country, even though I had the opportunity to leave, but my main focus is because of my parents and stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that just remains. It's this whole idea of like a nuclear family thing where you focus on your nuclear family alone. It's a new thing, right? And I say this as someone who doesn't think necessarily your siblings have to be part of your family and your responsibilities, but your parents are. Like it's undoubtable, like on thick level and stuff like that. So if at this age, what I can do, like at this age, I am very helpful to them, that is a good reason to stay. That's a very big reason to stay because they're actually part of like my immediate family. They are the first family, if anything. Then you have your wife and kids. So yeah, but I don't know if that's a good response to what you're asking. But yeah, they've done so much for us. They deserve it. For the family to be complete as well, it would be, I mean, not that it's incomplete so that you don't feel bad because you're not staying with their grandparents. No, but it's just nicer if they're around and they can get to see their grandparents, even though their grandparents can be quite busy as well. But they get to see them, and between us, the children, and our parents, it's that they are at a stage where we can help them out. So why not help them out? Like if I wouldn't be very useful to them, I think I would gladly move out, move somewhere else. But whilst I can, it's an opportunity. So that's why we're
Okay. Mashallah. And how about you? What's your take on extended family?
Yeah, I think extended family, very important in terms of not how you raise your kids, but the way that your own kids like learn life and see interactions and character building. So I think it's my grandma is my dad's mom. She's still alive. Alhamdulillah. So I love, for example, when we get to go to Kano and stay with her and they get to experience a life that's so different to what we are used to. Like she doesn't speak English. So it's like they get to really live that chickengeri Kano life when you go to see her. And I love that they're able to get this at these ages. And I hope, that they'll remember that it's doing something positive in that way. Like you mentioned, them with their own, so that's their great grandma, right? And then with their grandparents, each one is different and each one offers a different kind of love to them and a different kind of experience each time. I always tell Huda to ask them questions and let them and I encourage them, my mom especially, I'm like, just tell her things about when you were a child and stuff like that. And with my siblings, I have lots of siblings, I have 10. So that's lots of different personalities, lots of different stories and characters. And it's challenging, for example, on holidays when we go to see them. And there are ways that maybe we try to raise our kids that's different from the way my sister is doing with her kids and my brother's doing with his kids. So you get life in so close and they learn a lot. And also we have to navigate those situations with love and understanding and all these things. And I think them being able to see that and experience that also shapes them, hopefully positively eventually. But yeah,
Okay,
that answers the
mashallah.
question.
Abdul.
Yes, go ahead.
So I know this is one of the things I say a lot because I think I've even written a blog post about it like over maybe like 12, 15 years ago. it's something I still believe, because when we're talking about the wider extended family, actually just whatever you may define as extended family, like beyond your parents and your kids and spouse, I say that my understanding is that, yes, you can have a familial relationship, but it doesn't mean just, or the way I put it rather is that we can be family, but doesn't mean we have to be family friends, right? Because I think the community that you kind of engage with like long term and your kids are around and just that rubs off your kids and yourself should be something intentional, right? You shouldn't have to deal with whatever genetic lottery you were given. I mean, obviously, it's not a genetic lottery, it's just by way of saying, because God knows why He put certain people together. So I'm just saying that for tarbiyah and stuff, like you don't, even with what I have said, I'm a firm believer that you have to be intentional about the level of engagement with the wider extended family, in that just, yes, you have to have a good relationship, or you should have a good relationship on a familial level, but there's a level that you have to kind of, depending on their values and how they decide to do things. You can have a very close, almost familial relationship with people that you align with on values and ethics and stuff like that.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the episode. Really appreciate your time. Next episode with Bilal, we'll be talking about the third pillar of the Mohsinair philosophy, which is impact. So thank you so much, Bilal. Thank you, Sajida. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
From our family to yours, thank you for being here. This journey of Ihsan is not one that we can take alone, so let's keep learning together, inshallah. If you enjoyed the podcast, please give it a rating and share it with your friends and family and anyone you know who might be interested.
Subscribe to the podcast. Join us at mohsinair.com to continue the conversation. Until then, may your days be full of barakah. Assalamu alaikum.